Hi there, I want to share some brief words of Torah with you about not just this week's Parsha, which is Vayikra, which is the opening Parsha of the third book of the Torah, Leviticus. It's really about the whole book of Leviticus. Another term for the Parsha, or the book of Leviticus, is Torat Kohanim, which means the Torah, the book for the Kohanim. Why is that? Because basically, the Ramban explains in his introduction to the book, the third book of the Torah is divided into two separate parts, which of course are very connected. The first one is the idea of the korbanot, the sacrifices. The second part is Mishmeret HaMishkan, which means safeguarding the Mishkan. What does that mean, and what exactly is the connection? The answer is really very simple. The Mishkan, like we explained many times in the past, is a dwelling place for God's presence amongst the Jewish people. That's the purpose of the Mishkan. In order for it to be so it needs to be a place that is sanctified, that is kadosh, that is special, and that is set aside specifically for God. Therefore, the Kohanim have to maintain the dignity and the sanctity of the Mishkan. How do they go about doing that? By not becoming tamei. Or when they do become tamei, spiritually impure, they do not enter into the Mishkan. And in this way, the first purpose of the Mishkan, which is the fact that it's a place to bring korbanot. That's the practical aspect and element of the Mishkan. It's where the Kohanim bring korbanot sacrifices on behalf of the Jewish people. Why? In order to maintain that connection between the people and Hashem. They can do so when they maintain the sanctity, the dignity of the Mishkan itself. Why is that? Because what's the idea of a korban? The idea of a korban is becoming close with Hashem. It's not just bringing a sacrifice. It's not something that's done by rote. It's not ritual that's prescribed. When you do something wrong, here's what you got to do. You say X amount of Hail Marys, you bring X amount of sacrifices to God. No, that's not the Jewish religion. The Jewish religion is that through the ritual, and part of the ritual is becoming close to Hashem. Part of the ritual of the sacrifice is coming close with Hashem. That's why the word korban comes from the word karov, to become close to Hashem, and therefore it's always accompanied by tshuva. And that's why, if you look at Mishlei in Proverbs, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, says a fascinating thing. It says, Zevach Rishoim To'eva, which means the sacrifice of a wicked person is To'eva. It's disgusting. It's an abomination. Why is that? Explains the Vilna Gaon. Very simply. The idea of a korban is to come close to Hashem. A Rasha, all he's doing is going through the motions. God's not interested in going through the motions. God is interested in you becoming close to Him. There's another way of presenting this idea. A very simple chakira, a very simple way of talking about two things from two different sides. A distinction that's made. It's a question of our view of life. What is my position in the world? Is my position in the world is that I'm part of God's world. God says, you, Avi, I want you to go ahead and behave in a specific kind of way, and when you do so, you're part of my world. Or no, that's not the way I look at life. I'm not part of God's world. Rather, God is part of my world. To whatever extent I allow God into my life, I'm going to be part of, God's going to be in my life. Therefore, when the ritual makes sense to me, when it's appropriate, when the timing is good, when I feel right, so then I'm going to go ahead and do that kind of a thing. Is that the idea? Is that the perspective of life that God desires from us? So what is a korban? A korban is, explains the Vilna Gaon, when I come close to Hashem, how do I do that? By doing tshuva. How do I do tshuva? Well, because up to this point, I only managed to do something incorrectly, something bad, shall we say. I managed to sin by pushing God out of my life. By having an element of pride and haughtiness and some sort of a sense of self where I didn't want God there. Doing tshuva, bringing a korban, says, I'm going to come close to you, Hashem. By reducing, by minimizing that amount of self and rather allowing you back in my life. Or better said, allowing myself to become part of your world. The Rasha doesn't do that. The Rasha says, no, you're still not part of my world. I'll allow you in to whatever extent possible. You want me to go through ritual in order to attain atonement? I'll go ahead and do that. Says Shlomo HaMelech, no, that's tueva, that's an abomination. That's not what Hashem has in mind. A korban is coming close to Hashem. Therefore, the Kohanim, they need to maintain a level of sanctity, a level of dignity. That's why they have special clothing, which we'll talk about in the future. That's why they cannot become tamei. That's why they have to maintain a level of spiritual purity, of tahara. That's the idea that we're going for. And therefore, the Mishkan is a place where they can only enter when they are tahar. Why is that? Because the Mishkan is a place for us all to come close to Hashem. We can only do that when we follow Hashem's instructions. With that, I want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom. I want to wish you a wonderful Shabbos. May we be inspired by the seemingly obscure ideas of the korbanot. Because even though we don't have korbanot today, we can still come close to Hashem by allowing not just Hashem to be back into my life, into our lives, but rather becoming part of Hashem's world, but becoming part of God's world. Shabbat Shalom.